Welcome, Jamie Lee, to the Empathy Edge podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. You are a coach, you are a podcast host, and I love that you bring this aspect to your coaching around self-advocacy that's really based in science and brain science. So we are going to have such a great conversation about the link between empathy and neuroplasticity and self-advocacy and all the things. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm genuinely so excited to be in this conversation because I think, Maria, you are the embodiment of all of that, right? Self-advocacy, empathy, and neuroplasticity. I love your story of how you bounced back from a brain aneurysm, right, to become an advocate for empathy in the workplace.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much. I love it. I love it. So, I want to hear a little bit more before we dive into all the topics around what is self-advocacy and what is the role of the nervous system in helping us emotionally regulate. These are all aspects that I've talked about in the past that are really important to having the capacity to embrace empathy and to be more of a human-centered leader. So, before we get into all that, I want to hear a little bit about your story and how you got into this work and what makes you so passionate about it.
I am really passionate about this topic, about self-advocacy and the overlap of self-directed neuroplasticity because I struggled so much with it myself. And my failure has become the impetus for the work that I do today. About 2 decades ago, I'm dating myself. I was working at a hedge fund as a junior analyst, and I was very wet behind the ears, and I didn't know how to advocate for my professional value. And I didn't know how to speak up and engage in conversations, especially when I was the only female in the room and also a minority, right? A double minority, female, but also Asian. And so I found out in this job that I was making 50% of the going market range. And that was the moment I realized, wow, I had a stellar education. I had a stellar liberal arts education, but I didn't know how to speak up and engage in conversations that are strategic to my career growth. And it really blew my mind when it finally dawned on me through studying negotiation, self-advocacy, career growth. It really blew my mind when I realized the missing link was reframing empathy,
Mm.
right? Seeing your self-advocacy as an act of service, as a way to help business decision makers make better decisions. And that's when I realized I needed to share this information with as much people, especially women and underrepresented people,
Hmm.
because we want to see diversity. When we have more women, more underrepresented people in leadership suites, they make better decisions. The business does better, right? You're nodding your head. I'm preaching to the choir.
I love
And
it.
so, yeah, and so I got really curious about how to help my clients, first how to help myself, and then help my clients reframe self-advocacy as an act of service. And I saw that the missing link was helping them see that it is through empathy and it is also through self-compassion.
Mm. So much to unpack in everything you
Yeah.
said. I love it all. And I love this idea of reframing self-advocacy as an act of service because sometimes people misinterpret self-advocacy as bragging or being too pushy or being too aggressive. And usually these are words reserved for women or underrepresented groups, not
Right.
usually straight white men. But that idea of understanding that you can advocate for yourself, you can speak up, you can use your voice, and you can embrace empathy while you do it at the same time. And if you do, you will open more ears and more hearts by doing it that way instead of sort of trying to ram the truck through the concrete wall, which I feel like some people swing that pendulum to the other side of like, oh, I have to advocate for myself. That means I have to just, cram my way through and I have to just, forget how I'm treating people or how I'm showing up. And I love that you marry those two things. And I love this idea of the fact that so much of what you teach and what you coach on is based in science, is based in neuroscience and brain science and all of that because it gives people a very tangible way to approach it. It's not
Thank you.
super woo-woo, right? So let's just get into it. I want to talk about empathy and neuroplasticity as the foundations for self-advocacy. And so let's do some definitions here first. First, what do you mean by self-advocacy and what do you mean by neuroplasticity for people that might be unfamiliar?
So, self-advocacy, I mean, a way of communicating to stakeholders and decision makers the value of your ask.
Mm-hmm.
And when I coach my clients to advocate for their career growth, I always challenge them to think about what are the business benefits? How does what does the business get? What does the organization get? You know, the board members, whoever it is that you are advocating with, you want to think about it through their perspective, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that I know you touched on this in Empathy Dilemma in your book, but that's cognitive empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about the ask, but from a different lens, not from the lens of, oh, what I want is selfish and greedy, but what if what I want actually helps them do their jobs better?
Right. Right. I mean, it's a very marketing way to look at it. I've been a marketing executive my whole career, and it's understanding that you want to look at things from the other person's perspective because people are always wondering what's in it for me. And
Exactly.
so for them to be, it's not enough for you to say, I deserve this because I deserve this. But if you really want to have an impact, it's I deserve this because this is what this will do for the company. This is how it will impact performance. And I really feel like, like I've tried to do with empathy is make the business case for
Mhm.
empathy, not because I'm trying to make it cold and calculating, but that's how you influence people. That's how you reach people. That's how you get them on your side is for them to understand that it's a win-win and that there's something in it for them. And I would be remiss if I didn't reference here an interview. I'll put it in the show notes I did with one of my colleagues, Dia Bondi, who is all about helping people make big asks and get it. And she talks a lot about what is the offer behind your ask. It's not just you asking something because you want it, but how do you create an offer that actually benefits both of you because
I
of your
love that.
ask? Yeah, you two should
Exactly.
meet. Oh my gosh. So then explain to us a little bit about how you define neuroplasticity for people that are unfamiliar. And then I want to talk about those empathy and neuroplasticity as the foundation for self-advocacy.
Yes. So, self-directed neuroplasticity is something that I teach my coaching clients. And neuroplasticity, in plain language, is rewiring or changing your brain. And it's something that we do innately. Another way to think about neuroplasticity is being able to have different internal associations and access your meaning making abilities, which again is something that we do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I teach research backed self directed neuroplasticity techniques is because we always operate from the default mode. If you know a little bit about neuroscience like I do, right? You're familiar with the concept of the default mode of the brain, right? And in the default mode, we're always repeating our habituated patterns of thinking, feeling, and doing. And often when I work with high achieving leaders who don't have a strong track record of having advocated assertively for what they want, usually they have habituated patterns of feeling anxious, nervous, or worried, or anticipating rejection as opposed to anticipating, hey, this is going to be a great, juicy conversation for all of us. Right. And there's great research that came out of Max Planck Society in Europe, about 10 years ago. And what they did was they trained a group of women, 30 women, in their version of empathy training. And how they interpreted empathy is your ability to share or to perceive other people's suffering. And so their version of empathy training was showing these participants very sad, traumatic videos of people experiencing something difficult. And then they measured their brain activity and they saw that the pain receptors, the parts of the brain that's associated with pain and negative emotions, were lighting up, which is, of course, that's what you would expect them to do because they've
Right.
been trained to feel the pain and the suffering of the people in the videos. And then they took the same group of people and they had them do compassion training. And compassion training is something that they adapted from the contemplative, I'm going to mess up this word, the meditation practices of, let's say, Buddhists and other
Hmm.
faiths. And what they found is that once they did 2 weeks of compassion training, the areas of the brain that are associated with reward, affection, love, affiliation lit up because they were training to cultivate the sense of friendliness.
Hmm.
And then they had the same group of people rewatch those sad videos and they didn't feel as bad. They still were able to access this feeling of compassion. And so,
Mm.
what this shows us is that the brain uh, adapts, the brain grows, it changes according to the practices that you expose it to. And compassion, I think, is the missing link that helps us be able to access self-advocacy, those muscles
Hmm.
um, for ourselves. And the reason why I say that is because often in our culture, and especially for women and underrepresented leaders, we have a tendency to associate empathy with feeling bad for
Yeah,
other
it's
people.
and it's not sympathy, it's not pity, because you can have empathy for someone that's going through something wonderful as well. You can be excited, just as excited for someone who is super excited about something or so happy. So I think we always forget that. We think that empathy is always associated with sharing the feelings in a negative way.
Right. But with compassion, you're able to light up different areas of the brain that are associated with motivation, with
Hmm.
proactive care. And I think compassion is something that, as you said, empathy is something that you can do for self-interest, and
Hmm.
sometimes you can generate empathy from the outside in. And I think compassion is something that we also do really for ourselves, right?
Hmm.
Because when we cultivate compassion, it helps us feel good. And when we can feel good, we can extend that good feeling towards
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And it helps us to be able to address even thorny topics, even difficult topics, even negative emotion, and be
Mhm.
able to take proactive care.
So, talk to us a little bit about how that works in, like, give us an example of how that works in self-advocacy.
Yes. So in my coaching practice, as I said, clients I work with, high achieving women, underrepresented leaders, and often they got to where they are because they've been beating themselves up harshly. They've been setting themselves up to a perfectionist standard
Hmm.
and working twice as hard as other people. And it doesn't feel right to direct compassion towards themselves.
Mm.
Like I've had a conversation with a leader in the finance world, a coaching session, and she was feeling a lot of imposter syndrome. She was feeling um, nervous and anxious about achieving an ambitious business goal. And in that coaching session, I paused her and I said, "Hey, do you know what compassion means?" And she's like, "What is that?" It was a foreign concept to her.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I introduced the concept and I helped her reframe her situation, her actions through the lens of compassion, what happened was the pressure eased. And when the pressure eased, her performance went up. And when her
Mm.
performance went up, she was able to reconnect with the sense of purpose that she had for the project. And she ended up raising $100 million for a new fund.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
that is so telling. And, I often talk about compassion being empathy in action, and you kind of hit on that as well. As compassion is the action piece. It's that now I'm motivated to do something. And not that empathy on its own is a wasted emotion. I would hate to call it that. But there's another side to that where it's like, okay, now that you've connected with that person and you're seeing things from their point of view, what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do with that information? And it doesn't mean you have to do something big and bold. It could just be listening. It could just be holding space for someone. It could be all these different things. But what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I'm hearing you say it's about understanding that you can bring an act of compassion even in the midst of making an ask, even in the midst of advocating for yourself. Am I kind of getting that right?
Absolutely. I love how in your book, Empathy Dilemma, which is a great book, an award-winning book, I like how you break down empathy into cognitive and emotional, right? We can
Hmm.
cognitively understand the business wants to make more money, save money, right? And we can also feel the emotions of other people. And I think compassion is a subset
Hmm.
of that emotional empathy where you feel the emotion, you feel that affiliation, the positive feelings of love, affection, and you take proactive care.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So we've talked a lot on the show and in my books, as you know, where I talk about empathy's got to start at home and we have to get our own house in order before we can make space in our brains and our hearts for empathy for others. We have to regulate ourselves and be able to respond rather than react out of just knee-jerk reactions, right? So talk to us a little bit about the role of the nervous system in that self regulation and tell us what's actually going on there and how you interrupt that pattern.
Absolutely. So, this is something that I often teach when I do self-advocacy trainings and coaching sessions with individuals. It's only natural for some people to associate stress, conflict, confrontation with speaking up for themselves if they've had past experiences where they were uh,
Mm,
reprimanded or rejected, or they were told that it wasn't the time and the place, and so that can leave a mark on their nervous system. An example of that is if this is something that I have coached my clients through. If you notice some things that are not being communicated well by certain leaders and you speak up about it without as much grace and nuance as you would hope, and then the reaction is like you get shut down,
right.
right? Or you get shoved away or pushed
Hmm.
out of the project. And that leaves a mark on your nervous system
Hmm.
because we take our work lives very personally. We
Yeah.
care deeply, right? And so some people, they come to me and they tell me they freeze up when they think about even speaking up again, even if it's a new environment, new team, new set of people, right? They
Yeah.
still they still notice their nervous system freezing up.
Yeah. It's like
And
once
so,
bitten, twice shy type of situation. Yeah.
right. And so what's happening is that your sympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that's associated with stress responses of flight, fight, freeze, that is being activated, right?
Hmm.
And there are very simple techniques that scientists have and neuroscientists have generated that help us access the parasympathetic nervous system, which is associated with rest and digest, and also a brain state that's more associated with compassionate empathy, presence, being in the moment. And I don't know about you, but I always do my best thinking, best negotiating, best advocating when I feel that I am present and connected in the moment.
Hmm.
So really, really simple technique that I can demonstrate right now is something that I have learned through my teacher, Melissa Tiers, and it's written in her book, The Anti-Anxiety Toolkit. It's a
Hmm.
great little book with all these very simple, short, brief techniques to help you access the parasympathetic nervous system in your thinking brain.
Hmm.
And this one is so simple. All you have to do is simply soften and diffuse your visual focus. Like pick a spot, and if people are listening, they can do it right now. Just pick a spot, look away from the little iPhone screen or your Android screen. Just pick a spot and then just soften and diffuse your focus and engage your peripheral vision. And if you wear glasses like I do, you immediately start to notice the fuzzy frames of your glasses or the two walls that you hadn't noticed but have been there all along. And
Uh-huh.
also, when you do that, you also notice that you can sense more of the ambient noise. You can
Mm.
almost feel the temperature of the room,
Mm-hmm.
right? And every time I engage my clients in this very simple, brief exercise, they notice that the chatter in their mind quiets down,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. So if you are in a high stakes conversation, maybe you are gunning for that promotion to managing director and you're speaking with your supervising manager and something gets a little heated in the moment and you notice that, that stress response coming up, it's something that you can do and still be completely present in the moment,
Mm. Is that
right?
also because for me, it's deep breathing? For me,
Yes.
it's like because I notice I hold my breath when I'm anxious and stressed, and the pitch of my voice gets higher because I'm not taking enough air in. And
Yeah.
so I will sort of like take a moment, take a really deep 2 or 3 belly breaths to re-engage that parasympathetic system. It sounds like this is something similar, but almost like from a visual perspective of
Right.
like taking a deep breath with your eyes. I don't know if that's like a
Yes.
thing, but I'm going to call it a thing. I love that idea, and thank you for explaining to us why it works. Like, why is it? Because I think we get so into that phase of stress or anxiety, and all kinds of physiological things are happening to us, and we have to first notice it. I think
Mm-hmm.
that for me, that was the biggest thing of noticing what my body was doing and seeing what was happening before it escalated,
Mm-hmm.
and then interrupting that pattern.
That's right.
And why do you think it is so hard for people? I mean, notwithstanding that they don't know some of these tools, but there's so many moments we all have where we regret our reaction later. But in the moment, what stops us from interrupting it in the moment? What's your theory?
There's so many things. I mean, in this day and age, first of all, we have so many interruptions, distractions, phones,
Mm-hmm.
screens,
Mm-hmm.
uh, data input. And I think it can be a little bit more tricky
Mm-hmm.
to, yes, these are self-directed neuroplasticity tools. So ultimately, I teach my clients so that they implement these tools on their own time and they practice and then they
Right.
generate a new neural pattern, a new neural network.
Mm-hmm.
But it does help to work with someone
Mm-hmm.
because we're not able to see the contents of our own brains.
Yeah.
Like I can't there are always things happening outside my conscious awareness, right? Our conscious
Right.
awareness can process up to 7 to 9 ±2 bits of information at any given moment, but our
Mm-hmm.
subconscious is processing up to 11 million bits of information per second. So
Wow.
it's still more impressive than any AI.
Yeah.
And it sustains a living organism, right? It keeps me
Yeah.
breathing and digesting and all of it. So memorizing and remembering. So it does help if you notice that you continue to repeat habituated patterns that you want to stop. It
Mm-hmm.
can help because you just don't have that perspective that a
Yeah.
third party can have.
Absolutely. And I think also like kind of I can't reiterate it enough. And it's why self-awareness is the first pillar in the new book in Empathy Dilemma. Because if you don't even realize it's happening, if you don't recognize that behavior as a habitual pattern, it's a lot harder for you to break that cycle because you don't think anything's going on. You don't recognize that anything's going on. But if you can start to pay attention to your heart rate, your palms, like your voice, just where you're feeling it in your body, a lot of people think that's super woo woo, but I think it's really practical. Like, we need to understand what fear and anxiety feels like in our body. We need to understand what me about to, unleash a tirade on someone before I do it, what it feels like in my body and what's causing it. Because otherwise, we can never interrupt those habitual patterns.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. And this is something that I learned from my mentor, James Tripp. And what he did was he organized the different types of intelligences we have. And there are 6 different types of intelligences. The first is, of course, cognitive, which most of us
Hmm.
tend to engage in, right? When
Right.
we're typing email or writing up a proposal or, sitting in a meeting, we're almost always engaged in cognitive intelligence. But
Hmm.
then we also have episodic intelligence, being able to recall memory. We have metaphoric intelligence, right?
Mm.
Because we use language, and so much of our language is in the form of metaphors. Almost all of it
Yeah.
is metaphoric, right? And
Yeah.
then there's also the somatic intelligence, the intelligence of holding your body, like when you straighten your back and you take a deep breath into your belly, right? All of a
Hmm.
sudden you feel a shift, and that is accessing your somatic intelligence. But
Hmm.
also there's interoceptive, which is accessing um, your inner senses,
Hmm.
like the root of that word is to be able to connect with your gut. So sometimes when you ask somebody, hey, what does your gut say? Or
Yeah.
how do you feel on the inside, right? That's
Yeah.
accessing interoceptive intelligence. And I think all of that culminates into social intelligence,
Mm.
right? And I think
Yeah.
that's why what you're talking about, empathy being a business driver, is key, because when we're able to access all the different types of intelligences,
Hmm.
it culminates into greater social intelligence.
I love this so much. Can you cite his name again for us?
James Tripp,
James Tripp.
Tripp.
Great.
He teaches people to be change workers.
I love it. I'm going to put a link to his work as well as Melissa's in the show notes. Um, so let's talk a little bit about mirror neurons because it's really interesting to me. When I first started my empathy research back in like 2016, obviously I came across all the studies and research about mirror neurons first.
Mhm.
And this idea that, we are wired biologically with these mirror neurons, and they've done studies with babies where it's if they see something, they're going to mirror it, right? So you see someone crying, a baby might start crying. You see someone laughing, a baby will start laughing. And it's this idea of how we as humans connect with each other is through these mirror neurons. So, talk to us a little bit about how skilled communicators, whether they're self-advocating or not, how do they, I don't want to say I mean, leverage mirror neurons to be so
Absolutely.
skilled and to communicate effectively?
I love this question because this is something that comes up often in my coaching sessions. And when people really understand it, it's like they're able to see the world of communication through a different lens.
Hmm.
We all know that influential speakers, what they do really beautifully is they read the room,
Hmm.
right? They don't just listen to the words, they don't just notice the faces that people are making, but they also listen at a deeper level where they can notice what is in this room, what is the energy, what is the emotion in this room, right?
Hmm.
And when they do that, they're also able to do this thing really well, which is pacing and leading. And pacing and leading is often the that one little crucial communication skill that's missing in in a high achieving leader's skill set that could really make or break how well what they advocate for lands with the other side.
Hmm.
And so, really simply, pacing and leading leverages mirror neurons because what you do is you pace, you reflect back using their precise words or the key words and the key expression that they're showing, right? To show them, I'm here with you,
Hmm.
right? You don't force a horse to water, you pace and then you lead the horse to water, right? It's
Hmm.
the same thing that you do in communication. You want to be able to read it, and even if you don't completely agree with everything that they're saying, right? If there are key phrases, hot
Hmm.
phrases, key metaphors that the people are using, it's
Hmm.
almost like those words are associated with a specific neuronal network,
Hmm.
right? And so you want to say it back to them
Hmm.
and then follow it up with a question that asks, okay, and what happens next? Or tell me more about that,
Hmm.
right? So you pace them, you meet them where they are, and then you direct the conversation. So that is a way to leverage mirror neurons because when people see and they can hear that you are meeting them where they are
Hmm.
more likely to follow your direction.
I love this so much because I've been speaking for a long time, but not on stages. I used to have to do lots of presentations in my 20s when I was coming up through my career. And I think about how I always enjoyed it, but a lot of it was just, I was just there speaking. And I didn't learn how to connect with the audience. Actually, where I learned that skill was through acting, was through being on stage and being able to read the room and the energy in the room and try to either get something from it or try to like do something with what was going on stage to re-engage the audience. But even, I think back to some presentations that I gave, years ago, decades ago, and I'm like, oh God, that must have been awful. But now it's very much if I can tell they're excited, I'll match their excitement. If I can tell I'm losing them, I might slow down or pause or ask a question. And learning how to do that when you're so concerned with the content you're delivering, and let's not even forget, just your own self-consciousness of being up in front of a room of people, it can be really hard. But I've found that I actually make myself feel better the more that I can connect with the audience and meet them where they are. It actually, in a weird way, takes away my self-consciousness because I
I
know that
would
I'm getting a reaction and I'm getting through, I guess I'm trying to say.
I would not be surprised if they took a functional MRI of your brain in that moment when
Uh-huh.
you are making that connection. It's probably a lot like that research I cited, where the areas of the brain that are associated with love, connection, affiliation,
Mm-hmm.
reward, that's lighting up
Yeah.
because your brain is like, I can empathize, but I
Mm-hmm.
also care about their experience in a
Right.
proactive way. In other words,
Right.
it's compassion in action.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I find that it also helps me be more impromptu. Some people sometimes we're so afraid to let go of the script or we're so afraid to let go of our talking points. But when I'm able to connect, it almost doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what my talking points were. If I'm able to tell a story in the moment that I wasn't planning on telling because I'm having a connection with someone, it just creates a more organic conversation.
Yeah.
And I love that you're explaining to us why that's the case from sort of a neuroscience perspective. It's almost like we're building an affinity with the person that we're talking to, and we sort of become less concerned with they think of us and more concerned with how they think and feel and if they're on board. It kind of gets us out of the ego a little bit.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. I
yeah.
love that. That's so spot
Fascinating,
on.
fascinating. So I love all this stuff. What's one last thing? I know, sort of the topic of your podcast is risky conversations, which I love that name so much. How do you handle all of this advice and all of these concepts you're talking about? Where they really get tested is when you're having those risky conversations and you're having the difficult conversations, right? It's one thing for us to have a conversation where I'm giving an excellent performance review to you, right? But when you're having, I call them crunchy conversations, right? How can we remember this advice in those moments where the self-consciousness and the self-doubt starts creeping in, especially if it's a difficult conversation and we don't know how the other person is going to react or if they're going to react positively or negatively?
So, a couple of things. What I do in coaching is help my clients engage all the different types of intelligences, right?
Hmm.
So, right off the bat, cognitive level, I always encourage my clients to remember if it feels awkward, you're doing it right. And in fact, what we do know from neuroscience is that when new neurons are being connected and fired and wired together, it feels weird. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're learning and growing. And I just coached a client this morning who is aiming for a promotion and she wants to improve her sales performance. And she engaged in some strategic conversations with the hope of leading to a sale. And she's like, yeah, I don't know. I think it was a 6 out of 10 because I felt awkward. And I said, wait, but did you meet your objective? She's like, yeah. And you felt awkward? I think you did it right.
Well, no one promised it was going to be easy. This is the thing I always say is like, Yeah, even when you're practicing empathy or practicing any new skill, it's like going to the gym for the first time. It's going to feel weird and you're going to be sore and you might not think you had a great workout. You might not, it might be really ugly to watch you working out, in that moment, but it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you're
Right.
practicing it. There's a reason they say practice makes perfect. Like practice isn't supposed to be perfect. Practice is supposed to be where you make the mistakes and where you feel uncomfortable and where you take the risks. So I love that. I love that you're like, yeah, if it feels awkward, you're probably doing it right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Mhm.
was just gonna add something real quick because you're sparking some things for me. You mentioned my story of recovering from my brain aneurysm, and in my rehabilitation, when I was working on my cognitive deficits, none of that was comfortable. And it was because my brain was fine. Now you're telling me I'm understanding now. It's because my brain was finding new ways of doing things that I'd done automatically for so long. Things
Mhm.
like vocabulary recall or, keeping up with a conversation or, any number of things that I was working on when I first got home from the hospital. And it was so, I don't know what the word is, like not painful, but it was just very jarring to be like, I know I used to be able to do this with no issue. And so it was painful and it did feel awkward until I built those new strategies and I built those new neural pathways up. And now people go, "Oh my gosh, you seem like you had a miraculous recovery." I'm like, you know, kinda, but also it wasn't easy. It was painful to get my brain just like any workout, right? To get my brain to operate in a slightly different way than it had before. And so I think that's a really great message to tell people of if you're not used to doing some of this for yourself or practicing empathy or anything that we're talking about here, it's okay. You're not doing it wrong just because it's uncomfortable.
Right. And therein lies the compassion,
Hmm.
self-directed compassion, which is so closely linked with self-directed neuroplasticity.
Hmm. I'm
Yeah,
going to throw you a curveball question. I would just love to hear about, do you have like a most or one of your most memorable clients? And can you share a little bit like before and after of work? I know
absolutely.
you've shared a few stories with us already, but who sort of stands out in terms of like when they came to you, this is what they were facing. And then after working with you or as they worked with you, this is what they were able to accomplish.
I have a client who reached out to me because she felt like an imposter.
Mm,
She knew she had an experience of building her own business.
hmm.
It had its success, it had its ups and downs, but she was now working inside an organization and she felt she was being put down.
Mm,
She also happened to be the only Indigenous woman in that team, a
hmm.
person of color, and she wanted to be able to build up her self-confidence and advocate for a promotion, for a raise. And she wanted to just feel better, feel
Yeah.
more confident under her own skin.
Hmm.
So I, coached her, taught her self-directed plasticity techniques.
Uh-huh.
And again, we arrived back at self-compassion. How do we direct compassion towards ourselves so that we can be, even if it is just a team of one,
Hmm.
believing in ourselves, believing in our potential,
Hmm.
believing in what we're capable of doing?
Hmm.
And then as soon as it clicked for her, she realized she can do way better. I mean, she negotiated, she got a pay raise, and she's like, no, actually, I have potential. I can
Yeah.
do way better than this. And she set up her own consulting agency. And literally within weeks, she was fully booked with seven-figure contracts.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Talk about getting out of your own way like that.
She got exactly, she got out of her own way
Yeah.
and she became the CEO of her own agency.
Yeah.
And she was just able to connect the resources that were already within her
Hmm.
to opportunities that were in front of her. And that's how she
Mm.
was able to generate that result.
I'm just hearing this theme of basically getting you out of your own head, which is so applicable to empathy, right? When we're too caught up in our own stuff, again, we have no space for empathy for other people because we're in survival mode. And so much of it, what you're talking about is when you're coaching people who are suffering from anxiety or self-doubt or imposter syndrome, that's them getting caught up in their own stuff, and it doesn't leave room for them to have the connections when they're having the conversations because they're too, and not, I don't mean this in an egotistical way, they're too self-focused because they're in survival mode. But
Right.
when you're able to open up and you're able to sort of settle those voices down, that's when you can practice empathy effectively with other people and leverage that to meet your goals. Leverage that to drive impact and
And
results
exceed
because now
them.
you're outward focused versus inward focused and not outward focused in, I'm going to deplete myself by doing what other people want. What I mean by that is you're so well grounded and present in yourself, you are able to be outward focused and able to connect with empathy for other people.
Yes, because you were able to direct that empathy towards yourself
Yes.
first, and then it goes outward.
A
Yes.
100%. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. I could talk to you so much longer. Um, we are going to have all your links in the show notes. And also, I know you have a fantastic offer, which I will put in the show notes to book a free hour consultation with you for one-to-one coaching. So, listeners, take advantage of that. Jamie is in demand. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today and your techniques and some really actionable things that people can take away today.
You're so welcome. And thank you for being the living embodiment of what self-directed neuroplasticity
Oh
can
my
do when it
gosh.
meets empathy.
Thank you so much. I will remember that on my low days because we all have low days. So I will take that. I will take that with grace. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Empathy Edge podcast. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Please rate, review, and share with a friend or a colleague. And until next time, please remember that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Take care and be kind.